welcome back to another Lettuce Garden scripting tutorial. This is video 4 of our currency system playlist. So in this video, we're going to go over how to make an item shop. So if I walk up to our shopkeeper, I can see that I can buy consumable items and persistent items. If I buy a consumable item like a speed potion here or a health potion, these are just example items. When I die or leave the game, I won't spawn back with these items. However, if I buy a persistent item like a rocket launcher, when I buy this, if I leave the game or reset my character, I will keep spawning with a rocket launcher. So consumable items are only one life items and persistent items are forever items. So I'm going to show you guys how to make this sort of system for your game. If you want the final assets for this system, check out the link in the description. And if at any point you have any questions or comments or anything, make sure you join our Discord server so that we can help you out there. The first thing we're going to do for our system is create the user interface. So let's come up to Starter GUI and add in a new Screen GUI. And within here, let's make a new frame. And let's position this frame to be right in the middle of our screen. So let's set the anchor point to 0.5, 0.5, and the position to 0.50, 0.50. And for the size, we can just pick a size that we think would look good for our shop. And that's probably a bit too big in my opinion. Maybe something like that's more reasonable. And let's just style this up a bit. So maybe a black background with 0.2 transparency. Let's name our GUI here item shop. And so let's talk about what this shop has to have. So this shop has to have first a title to show that's the shop. It needs to have consumable items and persistent items. So let's make all of those. So let's make a title. And this title can just be, all the way across, decent size, not too big, not too small. I think that size is good. Let's set text scaled to true and set the color to white. And let's make this, the weight of it black to make it nice and bold. And we'll name this shop. And then we can name this guy shop title. And right below this, we want to have our consumable items and persistent items. So let's duplicate our shop title, Control D, and let's change the position to be 0.15. And let's set the size of this to be a little bit shorter. And I also want this to be aligned to the left. So let's set text X alignment to left. And let's name this consumable items. And let's also position this just slightly away because right now it's like right up against the edge, which doesn't look too great. So let's set the size to be 0.05 just to give it a nice spacing away. And then let's name this consumable items title. And right below this, we want to create a scrolling frame, and this scrolling frame will have all of our items in it. So let's set the position of this to be 0.3 in the Y. We want it to be 1 in the X because we want it to be all the way across. And maybe 0.2 tall. That's probably good. And let's name this scrolling frame consumable items. And let's do the same now for our persistent items. So let's duplicate our consumable items title and name it persistent items title. And let's position this just slightly below our scrolling frame. So maybe let's do 0.55, and we'll name this persistent, or we'll give it a text of persistent items. And then let's duplicate our consumable items scrolling frame and position this to be at 0.7. And then we'll rename this to be persistent items. Awesome. So we have our base shop structure here. Now, right now, our scrolling frames are scrolling in the vertical direction. However, we want to change this to be in the horizontal direction. So let's select both of our scrolling frames. So select them both at the same time. And let's remove the background. So set the background transparency to 1. We're going to set the canvas size to 0, 0, 0, 0. And the scrolling direction, we just want that to be X. And for horizontal scroll bar inset, we'll want this to be set to scroll bar. And that will make sense in a moment. And we want the scroll bar image color 3 to be white so that we can actually see it on our black background. So let's go ahead and design what our items in the shop will look like. So let's make like a template for it. So inside of our consumable items, let's make a new text button. And this will be the button that the players click to actually buy the item. We'll set this to be, we want it to take up the full height. So we'll set it to be 1 in the Y. And we also want it to be, so with scrolling frames, we have to keep something in mind. So with scrolling frames, the more items we add, because we're scrolling in the X, the size will infinitely get larger and larger as we add more items. So if we set this, for example, to be, 0.2 in the X, if our canvas size changes, which it will when we add more items. So when we add more items, this scroll will have to be able to scroll to the right. So the size will increase. So if we increase the size just a little bit, we'll see that the size of our buttons also change, which is not what we want. We want our buttons to keep a consistent size no matter what the size of our scrolling frame is. So in order to do that, what we can do is we can set a size constraint. So on your template, on your text button template that we're producing here, go to the size constraint property and set it to be relative YY. And what this does is it says use the Y height to constrain the size. So when I say now, if I say I want it to be 1 in the X and 1 in the Y, the X1 is the same as the Y1. So we can constrain our button size by whatever height our button has. So if I set the size to be, for example, 2010, our button will always have double the X size versus the 1 size in the Y. If this is confusing to you, please head over to our Discord server and I can try to explain it a little bit better there with some diagrams and whatnot. But yes, this is the general concept that we have to have for this shop. Make sure your size constraint is relative YY and your size is 2010. And we want to set a background color, on this to be maybe something like a dark gray. And we can get rid of the text. We're going to be adding our own text. So remove the button's default text. And let's name our button template. And within our template, what we want to have is we want to have an icon of the image of what the item is and a title and price. So let's just add in all of those. So let's add in a image label. And for this, we want it to be 1 in the height and 0.5 in the X. So it takes up half the frame. And then we can name this icon. And for our title, let's add in a new text label. Position it to be 0.5, so it starts in the middle. Size 0.50. And maybe for height, we can do 0.2. Remove the background color. And we can name this item. Or set the text to be item to represent the item name. Make it bold. And set the color to be white. I actually think we can make that a bit taller. So maybe we can set the... Actually, we didn't check text scale. I think even then still we can make it a bit taller. So maybe 0.3 in the Y. And let's name this to be item title. And now we have our item title showing up. And now we have to make the price. So let's duplicate our item title. Set the anchor point to be 0.1. And then 0.5010 for the position. And this will position at the bottom of our frame. Let's name this to be price. And then we can, just for now, for testing, we can say 200 coins to see what this would look like. I think that's a little bit too tall for our price. So let's maybe set this size to be 0.5, 0.2. I think that looks better. And then let's give our button a stroke. So add in a UI stroke. And then this will just add a little border around our button to make it stand out against the background a little bit. And because this is a text button, we have to make sure that we change our apply stroke mode to be border. And then we'll see that that added a slight border around of our item. So let's make it a little bit more visible. And we'll see that we're having issues with it kind of clipping at the top and bottom. Like we don't see the stroke there. And that's because this is hitting the edge of our scrolling frame. And anything that extends beyond the edges of a scrolling frame is hidden. So what we need to do is inside of our scrolling frame, let's add in something called a UI padding. And then here we can add in a little bit of space between the top and bottom of our scrolling frame. So let's set the padding for all of these properties to be 0.5. And this adds 5 pixels of padding around all edges of our buttons. Okay, so this is a pretty good template now. So what we want to happen now is when we want to have multiple templates or multiple buttons in the consumable items list, right? So Let's duplicate this a little bit, but we see that it's not extending. It's not making like a nice list. Well, that's because we have to add in a UI list layout. So add in a UI list layout, and then we want to set the fill direction to be horizontal. And then this makes our list show up horizontally. Now it's not scrolling, but we can fix that by coming up to consumable items and setting automatic canvas size to be X. And now we can scroll and see all of our items. Now I want to add a little bit of spacing between all of our items. So in UI list layout, we can set the padding to once again be 0.5, and then this will add some padding between all of our buttons. And I think our scroll bar is pretty thick here, so let's come back up to consumable items and set our scroll bar thickness to be 5. And I think that's a better size for our scrolling bar. And this is how we want our persistent items to show up as well. So what we can do is let's just copy everything within consumable items. So right click and copy, and then we can right click and paste into persistent items. And we see your items are showing up in the list now, but we don't have the scrolling. So let's set up our scrolling again for persistent items. So automatic canvas size X and scroll bar thickness to be 5. And now we can see that both of our list of items are showing up properly now. So let's remove all of the templates except one of them. We want to keep one. And we're ready to actually start writing up a script here. So let's make a script inside of our item shop called local script, and we'll name this to be item script. And what we can do is set up first set up a few variables. So local UI equals script.parent, and then local frame equals UI wait for child frame. Everything that we have is within our frame here, so we want to make sure that we have a variable for that. And then what we want here as well is consumable items frame equals frame, wait for child, consumable items, and then we want a persistent items frame, wait for child, persistent items. All right, so that's all of our variables set up. We're also going to set up a variable for our template. So now that we have our script, we use the same template for consumable and persistent items. So to make it easier for us, let's just move our template to be inside of our script. And then what we can do here is we can say local template equals script, wait for child, template. And now we're ready to actually show the items in the UI. So to do that, let's create a new module script inside of replicated storage. Actually, let's create a folder similar to what we did for the daily rewards. Let's make a folder. And we'll name this item shop. And we'll make a new module script in here. And we'll call this shop data. Inside of this script here, what we can do is we can return an array. And what we want to have here is this module is going to store all of our item data. So we have to have a category for persistent items and consumable. So persistent equals, and just set that to be an empty table. And then we have a consumables as well. And within these tables, what we want to have is an item image, a price, and a name for our UI. So let's do our persistent items first. So what we can do here is we can set up a few items. So let's make another table. And the first name we're going to have here is, maybe we want to sell a pistol. We want it to have a price of 20 coins. And these numbers are all testing numbers. Of course, you can choose numbers that make sense for your game. And then we'll have an image here. And for the images, what we're going to do is we're going to open up our toolbox. And I'm just going to search for a pistol image. And yeah, so this image looks fine. So we'll right click it and click copy asset ID. And we'll paste in the number for our image here. So this is the asset ID of our image. Now, if you're doing your own image, make sure that rather than going to marketplace images, you're going to inventory and finding the image that makes sense for your game. But for our testing code here for this tutorial, I'm just going to use random images from the toolbox. So we have our pistol set up. Let's make also a rocket launcher. Rocket launcher. And the name of this will be rocket launcher. And the price may be slightly more expensive, 30. And for image, let's type in rocket launcher. This one looks good. Copy that image and paste the number into there. For consumables, let's set up like maybe like a health potion. So new table, name equals health potion. Price is 10. And for an image, let's type in here health potion. Yeah, this one looks pretty good. So we'll just copy that and paste that in there. And maybe for another consumable, we'll make a speed potion. And the price for that will also be 10. And for the image, we'll just type in speed potion. And yeah, sure, this one looks fine. The images don't really matter, but you do want to pick images that make sense for your game. All right, so this is all of our item data set up now. So what we can do, we can go back to our UI code and make these items actually show up in our shop. So I'm going to drag this off to the side here so that we can see both at the same time. And I'm going to reopen our items script here on the left-hand side. So what we can do is we can reference our shop data as we're writing the code for our shop. So let's make a new function here. So local function add buttons to frame. And what this is going to do is basically we're going to say, hey, I want you to add buttons to the consumable items frame. And I also want you to add buttons to the persistent items frame. So first we need to know what frame we're parenting to. So the parent, and we also need the items that go into that parent. So if I say, hey, I want you to add consumable items to the consumables frame, here's the consumable data. So that's what we have here. And what we can do down here is, okay, well, first we have to import our shop data. So our shop data here is replicated stores.itemshop.shop data. So what we can do is we can say local item shop equals replicated storage, and we have to import this. So at the very top, we'll do local replicated storage equals game get service replicated storage. And then here for item shop, we can do replicated storage.itemshop. And then within our item shop, we can do shop data equals require item shop.shop data. And just to keep this consistent with our other scripts, let's actually move this above the rest of our variables up here. And we always want to be requiring stuff before we declare the rest of our variables. That's just kind of a standard practice in the Roblox industry. And what we can do now that we have our data, we can do add buttons to frame. So let's maybe do our consumables first. So we can say consumable items frame, and for the items, it's going to be shop data dot consumables. So we have here in our shop data, we have a persistence category, consumables category. Here we're saying use the consumables category and put it in the consumables frame. And then here we can do another function, add buttons to frame, and we can do persistent items frame and shop data dot persistent. And then this will say, you know, put it in the persistent frame, use the persistent data. So to make our items actually show up, what we have to do is make a for loop. So local for loop, unique name, item info in items do. And the reason why we say unique name item info, so item info is the item info that we set up here. And the unique name is our unique name that we set up for each item. And actually, I think we actually forgot to do that. So we did it for rocket launcher, but we forgot to do it for all the items. So let's just make that correction real quick. So we can do, what we have to do is pistol equals that, rocket launcher equals that. For this, health potion equals that, and then speed potion equals that. We want to make sure we have unique names for all of our items. And this will help us with data saving and whatnot later down the line, but this is very important. That we have unique names for every one of our items. And now that we have our item info, we can make a new button. So local new button equals template clone. And within our button, so let's open up our template to see what we have. We have an icon item title and price. So local item button dot item title dot text equals item info dot name. New button dot price dot text equals item info dot price, 2 dots and then coins. And new button dot icon equals, and we have our item info dot image. Now our images are stored as numbers, as we can see here on the right hand side. And in order to convert these numbers into an image that Roblox can process, we have to first, in front of our number, write out something rbx asset id : / and then we can append our image number to the end of that. And this basically just says to Roblox, make an image using this image asset ID. And once we have all that set up, we can do new button dot parent equals the parent that we passed in. So if we test this out now, if I click play, we should see our shop, populate with our items. And we'll just get rid of our daily claim. Okay, so we actually have an error, and I think I know what it is. Yeah, so for new button dot icon, we have to say dot image, and then that will fix that error. Okay, so now we can see that our items here are showing up. So we have our speed potion and health potion, and our rocket launcher and pistol. Looks like our speed potion image didn't translate. Yeah, it looks like we use the same number. So I'll just make that correction real quick. So I'll go back to Toolbox and make sure I copy the asset ID, and I'll change the speed potion to be the new asset. One other thing I noticed there is the icon had a background on it, but we don't want that. So let's set the background transparency to 1. And if we test this out now, that should fix both of those issues. Yep, so we have our speed potion and health potion here, and we have our persistent items showing up properly as well. So now we're actually ready to set up the actual buying of these items. So when I click health potion, I want to buy that health potion, right? So in order to do that, it's all going to be on the server for the most part. So let's create a new server script inside of server script service here. We'll name this item shop. And within our item shop scripts, we should keep this on the screen, but we'll just move it back over. So let's first figure out how we want to do this. So we need to tell the server when we click the buy button, and then we need to do something with that on the server. So inside of our item shop folder, let's create a new remote function. And this remote function will be called buy item. And with remote functions, we can, well, first let's actually make a variable for it. So first we have to do local item shop equals replicated storage. So let's get replicated storage equals game get service, replicated storage. And then item shop here is replicated storage.item shop. And then the buy item is now just item shop.buy item. And so my point earlier was with remote functions, what we have is something called onServerInvoke. So onServerInvoke equals function. And what we get here is the first thing we get is the player, and everything else we get to decide. So when we want to buy something, we want to know what the category of the item is and what the unique name is. So I want to know, for example, I'm trying to buy a persistent pistol, or I want to buy a consumable speed potion. Like I need that information to make sure that we can award the player the correct item. So actually just first, let's just print this. So print player category unique name. And on the client now, we need to now give the system a way to actually buy the item, right? So I'm actually thinking here, I wonder if what we can do instead of having, say, shop data.consumables passed in, what if we then pass in a string called consumables? And let me show you. So same with persistent. So we'll pass in a string here of consumables and persistent. And rather than items here, what we get is the category. And for items now, we can do local items equals shop data category. So we still get our items properly, but now we have access to this category. And what we can do here is when we click new button, so new button.activated, what I want to happen now is I want to pass in the category and the item name into the buy item remote function. So let's make a new variable here for the buy item. So local buy item equals item shop.buy item. And here now what we can do is we can do buy item, invoke server, and you can pass in the category and the unique name. So now we're passing in the category and unique name when we click the button. And on the server here, so the player is passed in automatically. We don't need to manually define that. So we automatically get the player, and we also get the category unique name. And then we're just going to print out that information. So let's click it. Let's click test. And now when I click in my output here, I can see when I click speed potion, health potion, it's printing properly. Cool. So now that we have that information, now we can actually make sure the player has enough coins. And if they do, give them the item. So let's go back to our server script. And let's bring in our currency service that we made in an earlier video. If you don't have the currency service, make sure you watch the first video of our series, and I will show you how to make your own currency service there. But our currency service is located in server script service. Server script service, and we can require that. So let's do local currency service equals require server script service dot currency service. And then here what we can do is, well, first we have to get the item info. So we also have to import here shop data. And then this is within our item shop. So let's actually move this up here. And then what we can do item shop.shop data. And the first thing we can do now in our on server invoke is we can get the item data. So local item data equals item shop category unique name. And then the price here is price equals item data dot price. And we can say here currency service. Sorry, we can do if currency service get money from the player is less than the price, then we want to return. So we get the price from the item data, we get the amount the player the money has, and checks to see if it's less than the price. If it's less than the price, we're going to return. The player doesn't have enough money, so we're just going to return. If they do have enough money, what we can do is currency service, remove money, player, price. So now this is actually where the player loses their money, right? So now that we've confirmed that the player does have, in fact, enough money, let's give them their item. So come back up to our workspace here, and let's make a new folder inside of server storage. We'll name this tools. And inside here, we'll make a new tool called pistol. So what we want to do here is we want to make a tool for every one of our items. So pistol, rocket launcher, health potion, speed potion. So pistol, rocket launcher, health potion, and speed potion. And for your actual game, you'd want to have the actual tools here. For the purpose of this video, I'm just making like some testing ones that don't actually do anything. But if you have, an actual like gun in your game, make sure that this is within your tools folder. And now that we have that, what we can do in our item shops script is, well, first let's get those tools. So local tools equals server storage dot tools. We have to import server storage. So local server storage equals game get server storage. And now that we have our tools, what we can do is We're going to do this all above our remove currency line, and I'll explain why in just a moment, but we can do local tool equals tools, find first child, item data.name. And then here we can say if not tool, then. So if the tool doesn't exist, we can warn tool not found for item data.name. And then we're going to return. So if there's for some reason an error where the tool doesn't exist, we're going to return and just say, the tool wasn't found. And then we're going to make sure that we don't remove players' money because there was an error. So we want to make sure we catch all the errors before we actually remove the money. But if the tool is found, we can then do local clone equals tool clone. And we'll set the clone.parent to be the player.backpack. And so what this will do now is it will create a copy of our tool and give it to the player's backpack, which means the player can now use that tool. So let's test this out. So when I buy a speed potion, we must be getting an error somewhere. Consumable is not a valid member of folder. Okay, let's make sure we're doing something sketchy here. Okay, yeah, so rather than doing item shop category, we actually want to do shop data category. That's a mistake on my part. Sorry about that, but that should fix our issue. So if I click speed potion, I can now buy speed potion, and you can see it removed 10 coins from my coins. If I buy a pistol, same thing. And the rocket launcher here, I don't have enough money for it. So there's no error message popping up yet, but you can see when I click it, it doesn't give me it, and my coins don't get removed. So maybe the first thing we should do here actually is if you don't have enough money to buy something, we should tell the player that in their UI. So let's do that. So what we can do here is we can say return false, because this is a remote function. So remote functions, the reason why we use a remote function is because the server can then pass data back to the client. So the data we're going to pass back is within these return statements. So we can say return false, not enough money. And for a tool, we can return false, tool not found. And then inside of our UI script here, we can actually get the messages here. So we can get local success and error message here. So if it returns false, success would be false, and then we'd have an error message. So if not success, then maybe we can do new button dot price dot text equals error message, and then we'll wait a bit. So task dot wait 2, and then we'll set the new button dot price dot text to be the original. And then what we can do here, let's make a new variable, local price text, and then we'll just copy and paste this item info dot price coins. We'll set that to be the item text. Sorry, the price text, and then we'll just set the variable. We'll set the price dot text to be that variable, and then here after 2 seconds we'll set it back to that. So when there's an error, our UI for 2 seconds will say what that error was, and then it will go back to the price. So if I go and test this out now, if I buy a few items and lose some money, okay, we get some errors. Unable to assign text property, line 30. Oh yeah, so that's because here, if in our server item shop script, if everything succeeds, we need to return true to tell the system that everything went through properly. So let's test this out again. So if I buy a few things here, so I lose some money. If I now try to buy the rocket launcher, it says not enough money for a couple seconds, then goes back to 30 coins. Awesome, so that's exactly what we wanted to happen. And now we have to set up the persistent items. So if I buy a rocket launcher or a pistol, I want that to be there when I leave the game or reset my character. If we test the game out right now, I'll go back into test mode. Basically, we've set up a consumable item system. So the consumables part of the shop is done. If I buy a speed potion and then reset my character, taking a moment this time. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So if I reset my character, the speed potion is no longer there. So that's a consumable item. And as well, with these items, you'd make it so when you actually use a speed potion in your game, you'd also delete the tool, and that would also consume it, right? But the way we set this system is consumable in the sense that when you die or leave the game, it's no longer there. It's just kind of like it exists for your current life. And so yeah, so let's set up some persistent items. So in our server script, first we need to import our data store 2. So local data store 2 equals require server script service.datastore2. And then here let's set up our data key. So local data key equals persistent items. And we want to make sure that we put the 0, 1 in as well. I was doing some testing earlier where I was using 0.1. So I'm actually going to use 0.3 for this video. But 0.1 will work for you. And like we talked about in other videos, if you want to reset your data, you just change the 0.3 to like 4. Like it. It's a really easy way to reset your data. You just change the number. And then we have to set the default data. So local default data equals an empty array, empty table. And then here, what we can do, right below remove currency, we can say if the category is persistent, then, well, first we have to get the data store. So local item store, not item store, we actually, that's confusing. Let's do local persistent store, data store 2. And here we can pass in the data key and the player. And then we can say currently owned persistent items or something like that. So local current persistent items equals persistent store get, and we have to pass in our default once again. And then here what we can do is we can do table.insert current persistent items unique name, and then this will add it to our table, and then we just have to update our store. So local persistent store set current items or current persistent items. Now, for persistent items, we have to do one more check. We have to make sure that the player doesn't already own the item. So what we can do here first is we can say if table.find current persistent items unique name, then return false already owned. And because we have to do another if statement here, let's move our remove money line to be below all the persistent stuff so that, if it errors out for whatever reason because we already own the item, then it doesn't remove our money. So this is setting up the storage system. So this will work when our player rejoins the game, but in order to make it work when they reset their character as well, we need to make another clone of the tool. So local second clone equals tool clone. And then we're going to parent this second clone. Second clone.parent will be player.starter gear. And what starter gear is similar to the backpack. However, the starter gear gives players the items when they respawn their character. So when you give a player something to their backpack, when they reset their character, that item won't be there anymore. But if you also put it into starter gear, it will be there when they reset their character. So let's test this out. So in this test now, if I buy a pistol or rocket launcher, I should only be able to buy one of them. And when I reset my character, they should still exist in my inventory. So if I buy a pistol, I bought a pistol, took my 20 coins. If I click it again, it says I already own it. Oh, but it did give me the item. Okay, so let's actually go back and fix that up. We actually need to make this if statement happen before we clone the tools. So let's actually move this down below the if statement as well. So if it's persistent, it will go through this if statement first, and then it will clone the tools and stuff. If it's consumable, it's just going to miss this block and go right into our clone. And now when we test this out, if I buy a pistol, it takes my 20 coins. If I click it again, it says I already own it. If I reset my character, the pistol is still there, so that worked. So let's go back to our server script now. And so now we need to make it so when they rejoin the game, they also get their items. So what we can do here is let's make a new function below everything. Local function player added. We'll get the player, and for now, let's just, well, I mean, not for now, just it's easy. Let's just copy and paste our store information. So we get the persistent store and current persistent items. And then what we can do here is we can loop through everything. So local for, we get the unique name and current persistent items. What we can do is we can say local tool equals tools. Actually, you know what? We can actually just copy and paste a lot of this. So local tool equals that. And rather than item data.name, what we have here is unique name. And then here we can also do unique name. And we don't have to return false here. We can just actually continue. So because this is a loop, if we own, say, 10 items, but item 2 fails, we don't want to return. We just want to like skip item 2. And if we return here, it would skip everything after item 2. However, if we write continue, it just skips, you know, that second item. So we can still process all the other tools, and we still get the proper warning showing up. And so here, what we can do is you can say local clone equals tool clone, and we have to have a second clone as well. Second clone equals tool clone. Clone.parent equals player.backpack. Second clone.parent equals player.starter here. And then here what we can do is we can say players.player added connect player added. And let's just import our players here. So local players equals game get service players. And we want to make sure here that if for whatever reason our script takes a couple extra seconds to load, or it loads after a player joins for whatever reason, we loop through the currently existing players as well. So for player in players, get players, do player added player. So this will make it so if we buy a persistent item and rejoin the game, the item is still there. And the way we can test this out is by adding something called saves in studio to our server storage. So data store 2 by default doesn't save your data while you're in studio. It only saves it if you tell it to. And to tell it to, we can add in a new bool value inside of our server storage. We'll make sure the value is checked, so set to true, and then we can say save in studio. And now when we test this out, what will happen is when I click pistol to buy it, it gives me the pistol, and so I can't buy it again. I already own it. But if I leave the game, and now if I come back, I should spawn with a pistol now. Okay, so so the system's working, but we made one mistake. We have to get the item data. So the tool name isn't the same as the unique name. It's actually, that's the name of our item data. So what we have to do here is local item data equals shop data dot persistent unique name. And then here, what we can do is local name equals item data.name. And then this is the name we want to use. So rather than using unique name here, we do name. And rather than printing tool not found for unique name, we can print it for name. And now when I rejoin the game, I should have my pistol appearing. There we go. So the pistol appears. And if I click it again in the shop, it says I already own it. So the persistent items are working now. So that's great. However, I think one little quality of life feature that would be nice to have is if I already own the pistol, it should tell me that I already own it here. So let's actually make that system. Let's make a show already owned. So let's make another remote function inside the item shop folder. So remote function, and we'll name this get owned. And then what we can do here is make a new variable. So right here under by item, local get owned equals item shop dot get owned. And then down here, So we're doing buy item.onServerInvoke. Right below that, we can do getOwned.onServerInvoke equals function. We get the player. And here we can also just copy and paste what we have here for the persistent items and get persistent items. Then we can return current persistent items. And on the client side, so inside of our item script, we can also get the getOwned remote function. So local getOwned equals itemshop.getOwned. And what we can do here, let's make another function called local function update owned items. And for our owned items, what we're going to do is we can say local owned equals getOwned invoke server. And then we can loop. So for unique name in owned, do. And what we want to do is we want to go through all of our persistent items and set the text to say owned. So we can say here, local button equals persistence items frame, find first child, unique name. And to make sure that we can find an item that has the same unique name, let's make sure we set the name of our button. So new button dot name equals unique name. And then now when we find first child of our button, we can get the correct button. And then what we can do here is we can say button dot price dot text equals owned. And we also want to make sure here that the button exists because you might own an item that's no longer on sale for whatever reason. So if not button, then we're going to continue just to make sure that nothing is breaking. And then, yeah, so then we'll just set the price to be owned. And then when the game starts, we can just update own items. And let's actually move this function above the other one. So let's Control X to cut, and then we're going to Control V to paste it above our add buttons to frame function. And then what we can do here is when we're doing our error message, we can say, so right now saying if not success, then, well, we can say an else. So if it is successful, then we also want to get owned items and update. We want to update our owned items. So if I buy a pistol, and then want that owned items to update, so it says owned in the UI. I also, if it is successful, I also want the message to say success. So maybe a better way to do this here is we can have a variable here that says local message, and then we'll just default this to bot. And then we'll cut this and paste it below our if statement. And then we can say here price.text equals message. And if it's not successful, then we'll set message to be the error message. So if it isn't successful, it will update our bot text to be whatever the error was. But if it was successful, it will just use the bot message. So we can test this out now. So it should tell me that I own items. So if I say, go and buy the rocket launcher now. Okay, well, first we see that I own the pistol. So it says own for the pistol. And when I buy the rocket launcher, it says bought. And then it goes back to it goes back to 30 coins. And this is not what we want. We want it to say owned. So what we can do here then is in our item script, we can say in our update owned items, well, let's return owned. So we can return owned. And then we can say here, local owned equals. And then we can say here, if table.find owned unique name, then message equals owned. Sorry, not message. We want to say price text. Price text equals owned. So basically what we're saying here is, sorry, not owned like that, own the text. That's right. All right, so basically we're saying here, update owned items. It gets the owned items from the server and then returns what they are. And then we can say, if we own whatever item that we just bought, then we set the price text to be owned. And remember, the price text usually says, like, say 30 coins. However, if we own it, we want it to say owned. So let me just reset my shop data. So persistent items 03, let me set this to 04, and that will reset my data there. I also want to reset my currency system data. So I come up to my currency system, and we can set this to be money 03, and that will reset my money. So now I'm back to 100 coins, and I don't own anything. So if I now buy the pistol, it says bought, and then after 2 seconds, it goes back to owned. With the health potion, it says bought, and goes back to the coins, same with the speed potion and rocket launcher. So everything is now working properly. We have our consumable and persistent items showing up properly. The only thing that's left to do now is make it so the UI pops up when we interact with the shopkeeper. So to make our shopkeeper, let's actually come up here to item shop and set enabled to be false. So uncheck enabled so we can hide it. In the avatar tab, we can add in a new rig. So click rig builder, block avatar, and this adds a new rig to our game. And let's just name this guy to be something like shopkeeper, one word. And we're going to make a new script inside of starter player scripts. So we'll make a new local script in here, and this will be called shopkeeper. So let's make a variable here, local shopkeeper equals workspace wait for child shopkeeper. And we're going to add a new prompt to our shopkeeper. So local prompt equals instance.new proximity prompt, prompt.parent equals shopkeeper. And in order for our prompt to show up, we have to make sure that prompt.requires line of sight is false. Because what will happen is when we place our prompt inside of our shopkeeper, it's going to be between, like there's going to be body parts that block the prompt and our player. And without requires line of sight being false, if there's any part at all blocking that path, we don't get the prompt. And in this case, the rig's body is going to block that path. So we want to make sure requires line of sight is false. So if we test this out, we should see a prompt now appearing on our shopkeeper. Yeah, okay, so it says E to interact. So let's change up that text. So with proximity prompts, we actually have a few options here. We can set the action text and the object text. So prompt.object text, so the object for this is a shop. And the prompt.action text, the action that we want to do is open. So now if we test this out, it says shop open on our prompt. And now when we interact with our prompt, we want to open up the shop. So here we can do prompt.triggered connect function players.localplayer .player GUI .item shop .enabled equals true. So let's import players. Game get service players. And what we're doing here, so our UI is called item shop, and it's within our UI. So when the game starts, right now it's in starter GUI, but when our game starts, there's something called player GUI inside of our player, and that's where our UI is stored. So we want to do player, local player, player GUI item shop, and then we can set that enable to be true. So if I now test this out, when I interact with the shopkeeper, the shop now opens. So now we just need to add in a close button to our shop. And what we can do here is, let's just make enabled true again so we can see what we're doing. We can go to our daily reward system and just click copy on our close button and paste it into our frame in our item shop. And now we have a close button showing up there. And in our item script, let's make a new variable. Here, local close button equals frame wait for child close button. And at the very bottom of our script here, we can do close button dot activated connect function UI dot enabled equals false. So let's set enabled to our item shop to be false again. Test this out. If I come up to our shopkeeper, I can open up the shop and I can close it. And now we have a shop that we can go up to, we can close, we can buy consumable items, we can buy persistent items, and everything's working. So that's actually the end of our tutorial here. If you have any questions, feel free to head over to our Discord server to ask. If you want the final files for this system, check out the link in the description. If you have any suggestions or feedback on the video, please make sure you leave a comment or a thumbs up or thumbs down so I know if I'm doing a good job or not. If you liked videos like this and you want to see more, make sure you hit the subscribe button with the bell notification. I hope to see you all in the next video.